What would your life look like if you actually played the long game? I know that today's world is very much about playing the short game, getting the likes, the engagement, the comments, getting that bit of money in the bank account by the end of the week so that we can do the things we want to do, right? But what if you've been doing that for a long time and it hasn't really given you the satisfaction you needed? Because if you really looked at the long game, you would probably think about decisions very differently. You would look at what the long-term repercussions are. Yeah, I'll accept that $250 now, but what does accepting that $250 do for the long game of my business? What about the energy? Are you doing something that requires a quick sprint now to get that result? Or do you need to save your energy and conserve it a little bit more for a longer run of time? Especially when if you've got a startup and you're going into investment period, the investment period could be anything from 2 to 5 to 7, maybe 10 years, where you're dealing with investors, you're dealing with people who have little slices of your company, board meetings, all that sort of thing. It's very hard to love that stuff. But when you're doing something that you play the long game with, you're looking for those results over that long period of time. You'll also do work that tends to compound over time. We'll look at that a little bit later of what that actually means. It's kind of like compound interest, where you might earn a little bit of interest every day, but when you compound that over a year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, you see a real move forward. And there's something about the long game that kind of calms you down in the moment. And it says, well, you know what? I'm going to take a hit today. I might have lost that battle, but I haven't lost the whole war. That's the kind of calm you feel as someone who has a much longer plan, a much bigger picture in play, rather than just what brings in the revenue today. You're looking at what's going to bring in even greater revenue over the next few years. So short-term thinking tends to chase very quick wins, quick revenue, reacts very emotionally, pivoting constantly, looking for the thing that may be working. When things go on a downturn, there's a tendency to panic. There's going, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? We're all going to burn down. We're all going to die. It tends to optimize for lots of visibility and lots of dopamine hits, right? People seeing you, people saying hello to you, people recognizing you. It's a social media experience, really, when you think about it. But long-term thinking really builds a long-term mastery over time, not just someone who knows how to talk about these things, but someone who's mastered these things in their lives or in their businesses or in their startups. Long-term thinking also expects that some days are going to be growing like crazy and some days it's just going to be nothing. Recently saw a post from a very popular dessert restaurant in Adelaide, and they do the most amazing, very much East Asian style desserts, which are very much about cuteness and about puffiness and lots of sweet souffles and things like that. Incredible looking desserts. And they have routinely every day of the week and night of the week, they have lines out the door in their Adelaide CBD location. They've been growing, and finally they went, we're going to have a second location now. So they opened a location in Henbury Beach. So not close to the CBD, it's a bit further out. And it's empty every day. They barely have made $2,000 in sales over a whole week in their first week of opening, when they're used to lines out the door. So they can look at that up and down and go, oh my goodness, we made such a big mistake. But it took them years to build up a viral following to come to the city. Yet they somehow expected that this new location would instantly be a success after the first location took years to become a success. Long-term thinking doesn't just think in terms of this quarter, they think in terms of the next decade or the next quarter century, perhaps, looking at things that are going to keep returning value and being viable for a much longer term. Sometimes there's even generational. You're building something that your kids will be able to benefit from, your grandkids will be able to benefit from. I know, for instance, I'm working with a guy right now in Darwin who he's all about building something that he will never see succeed, but it'll be something which provides generational wealth for the next 2 to 3 generations down. And also optimizes for compounding, that idea that this one little bit builds another little bit, and that stack starts to build up quite rapidly, quite exponentially, as little bit of money, like compound savings, for instance. You might put away $5 a week, but over time, that really does compound as you start to get compound interest, and you start to see that you're earning interest not just on $5 now, you're earning interest on $500, $5,000, $50,000 over a longer period of time. It optimizes for that process to go through. The long game is making decisions in the now that create an advantage in the future. But it does require a few really, really important things that we don't always have when we're in business or in the startup, and that's patience, because we really want that immediate reward straight away. So I really advise people to jump straight out of a decent job and straight into a business, because they don't have that resilience yet. They don't have that patience yet. They're used to doing their work, getting paid every fortnight, and everything is predictable. You step into a startup or a business, none of that is in place. Everything's up for grabs. So to resist that urge for immediate reward takes a lot of patience and a lot of emotional discipline, that when everybody else is panicking, that you stay steady. I know that I bought a cafe in the beginning of the pandemic, which many people said was a really stupid mistake to make. That cafe is now 6 cafes, 3 menswear stores, and 3 barbershops. That took the desire for me not to have to make money from that place for at least 6 to 12 months. And it didn't make any really realizable profit until probably after 12 months, when it started to turn that profit. But in the meantime, all the decisions I made, the asset financing for coffee carts, the paying extra staff, the having people come in and build a more compatible commercial kitchen for nighttime operations, all those things, whilst they really were taking a hit at the time, I knew that over the long period of time, now 6 years later, that it was definitely worth it. That compounding effect of those investments over time made it make sense. And having that emotional discipline at the time to not panic as the world is shutting down, and go, no, you've made the right decisions, you've got the right plan. It doesn't require people to be able to come into your dining room right now. Then you go, well, actually, things might be okay. But it also does seem to need like that special something, that little strategic foresight, the ability to be able to see things that often other people don't. They overlook that path because it's not the obvious path. They overlook that path because it's not what is normally considered to be the very safe, very defined path. And so that takes a little bit of divergent thinking, which means you have to be a little bit different sometimes. And whilst the accountant may say do this and the lawyer may say do that, sometimes the entrepreneur has to go, thank you for that input, but I need to do something else. And that's where things get really, really weird, because you're often going against some of the best advice you'll get in preparation for the long game. But well, funnily enough, if you explain the long game plans to those professionals, they usually go, okay, I think I see it now. And they'll help you formulate an even better strategy and plan to make that happen. So 2 philosophies in the long game are around optimizing for what's interesting. The other one's about thinking in waves. The first one, optimizing for interesting, has always been my North Star. By following what I'm genuinely interested and curious about, rather than what people say I should be interested in, I've built a career out of that. Now, it means that career is not linear. It's not get out of high school, go and study that thing, and then go and do that thing for the rest of your life. It doesn't work like that. You follow interests, because interests don't necessarily, the interests I had at 17 years old when I started at university is certainly not the interests I have now at 52 years old. The other one is thinking in waves, expecting that things are going to change. It's going to be cycles. There's going to be waves of change that come through, and understanding the nature of those cycles, that when there's an economic slowdown, it'll be followed by an economic boom. When interest rates are up, then other things will be at an advantage. When interest rates are down, other things will be going differently. Understanding that there are real waves and cycles, and understanding what they are at the macroeconomic level, which is very much about understanding, the sort of stuff you're going to read in newspapers about the economic state of things, and then understanding those microeconomic cycles, those little things that may operate maybe in your industry that are definite cycles. So understanding for me in cycles and waves was understanding that in the work I do, not the cafe stuff, the training work I do, December and January might as well not exist. They are just horrible months. There's no revenue. There's no interest. No one's doing anything. But then also understanding that June is the same. It's either everyone's trying to spend their money in June, so you get a whole lot of money in, then you have to do the work from July onwards. Understand that these cycles all impact what you do. And that means sort of rising above the situation, looking at the whole playing board, that whole chessboard that your world, your business is operating in, rather than just your business alone and what it does. Understanding competitive pressures, government changes, what they do, and then responding appropriately. Because these are pretty practical, right? They're not abstract. They require actual thinking and research and looking at big picture things, understanding economics. You think, well, yeah, I'm just running a little small business. What do I need to know about economics? Well, you need to understand cycles. You need to understand when there's money in the market, when there's not, what inflation means. If you're running a very premium fitness brand, you understand that when a crunch comes on people's wallets, when the inflation is causing a cost of living crisis like it is now, some things just aren't really going to happen. What we're finding is restaurants are really suffering at the moment, particularly restaurants that open in nights rather than days. You find that high-end things like, $10 donuts are not something that's on the family menu this week. They tend to be things that we sort of go into when there's lots of disposable income. We've got a problem now where people are conserving a lot of cash and not spending it because there's an expectation of some kind of economic bump on the road coming, AI or something like that, or a housing value crash or something that might be on the horizon. So understanding what these things are helps you to plan ahead over a long term. So optimize for interesting is working in something that you can stay engaged with long enough to master it, because you're not going to be a master of it first up, and you're probably going to lose interest in a lot of things. Like me learning Spanish, I lasted over a year doing it, but eventually I saw no result in it, and I wasn't really that interested in it. I'm surprised I lasted as long as I did, but I saw no practical realization of that in my life. When my partner is a Hindi speaker, I could have just learned Hindi, actually practically useful that I could use every day. So that's the next goal, learn Hindi. But choosing the path that genuinely sustains that level of curiosity means being willing to say, well, this may not be the cool thing. My obsessive interest in social media, graphic design, and making videos and infographics and all that. I love all that. And I've loved all that for 20 years. It has not waned, it hasn't moved. But it's only in the last few years that I've really got to a point where I've mastered it at a point where I can now teach other people how to do that. Not just do it for them, but teach them how to do it. So that goal, stay engaged long enough to master it. And you do that by basically doing the things you are interested in. Yes, interests change, but look at the long-term view of your past and you'll see certain themes come up. And those things may be something to build a business out of, or at least do the things in that business that keep you most engaged rather than the things that don't. Because interest creates creation. When you're curious, life becomes a game. Problems become puzzles. Frustrations are challenges. Efforts are actually sustainable. You find you create the time, right? Even if you're as ADHD as heck as I am, you still find the time and the focus on the things you're interested in. Just ask a Gen Z 25-year-old who plays, League of Legends or one of those video games on consoles, and you'll understand what this interest is. They may not be able to focus on quadratic equations or very high level science, but get them involved in their game and they can focus for 14 hours. Something that they will naturally persist with, not something they have natural resilience around. They'll get knocked down, they'll get back up again. They keep coming back for more, even if it's hard. But it's also something they have deep understanding of and a level of excellence. You get very good at things over a long period of time. So that's what interest helps create. But it's also then understanding that you need to build from what you already know and understand. So that long-term compounding advantage we've mentioned before comes from solving problems you actually give a damn about. For instance, I'm not interested in building software for other people's businesses to be able to grow, because I'm more interested in building software for my own businesses to grow, right? So building in markets that you generally understand, working with small business owners is something I'm very used to. Working with startups, something I'm very used to. But working with HR professionals and big four accountants, probably not something I'm really good at. Investing in businesses you can analyze deeply. You have enough interest in it that you can go into those businesses and analyze them. I've always been having had a weird obsession with retail cycles and the ups and downs and rebranding and the operations and the back of house things that happen in retail, right? Used to love it. I worked for the Maya store back when I was at university. And that period of time, it was so much more interesting what was happening behind the walls, not what was happening within the store. The store is just a shop front, but behind the walls, you see the operations. Same as McDonald's, another place I worked at during university. That what happens back of house is infinitely more interesting and much more, fun to watch than looking at what's happening in the front of house, which is basically just plastic seating. When volatility feels like noise, you find that you get a lot of calm during those uncertain times when you know this stuff. And instead of being panicked when things come, you actually become very focused, become very confident, you have very decisive action. That's the big difference between this long term and short term thinking. But you need to be able to preserve your original motivation, right? You've got to remember why you started this whole thing and revisit what the core interest is and become aligned with what that original purpose was. Because if you're interested in it, these things happen. You just do. You do remember why you started. You do revisit the core interest. You do tend to stay aligned with what the purpose is. So while interest will fuel the endurance, endurance then fuels the mastery. And mastery is what compounds in knowledge that grows over a period of time. You become deeply knowledgeable in this thing you're interested in. So that's the interesting side. The other side is that waves, understanding that things change. Nothing stays at the peak forever. I know we seem to think in this country that housing values will always be super highly inflated. But at some point, everything will come crashing down. Governments change, positions change, global outlook changes, careers plateau, products decline, industry shift, all those things change, right? Long-term thinkers expect this. We look at these things, we go, I can see that we're probably due for some kind of cyclical change. What happens though, the short-term thinkers only look at the last couple of years and go, great, let's go hard. But they don't realize that at some point something will change. They don't plan for that because they're so surprised by those changes when they come. They go, but this was all working before. Why is it not working now? Because nothing stays at a peak forever. And understanding that and seeing those things coming over the horizon requires working in your business on two modes. You got your head down where you're really going hard on solving problems and doubling down on what's working and with your current opportunities, making sure you're taking advantage of every single one of them and making sure you're delivering with great excellence and with great, with a lot of skill. But then occasionally you need to look up. And that's where you look up to look for those new opportunities, new ideas, or where you need to build a future capability or invest in something that's going to work in the future when maybe the thing you're doing now stops working. Apple's got this problem with their iPhone. It represents something like 80% of their income. So a massive change coming down the pipe, which could be AI glasses or something like that, could upend their entire business. So they have to keep investing in new things all the time. Meta's done the same. They decided to invest in the metaverse, which didn't work out for them, but now they've got all in on AI, and that seems to be getting some results for them. And you look at those tech companies, they're very much about that. Yes, we're head down, 80% working on what we're doing, but 20% of our time is spent on innovation. Google is a perfect example of this. Ad revenue really fuels their company, but now AI is starting to fuel it. AI processing, their AI tools, Gemini, all the things that you can pay extra for. They've now currently got a $300 a month AI plan that people are willingly paying for because they're getting so much value out of it. Same with OpenAI, Anthropic's Claude, Grok, even from Elon. They're all things that are allowing us to go, well, there's new ideas, new opportunities. I'll invest in those. But the long game requires you getting to go between both. You're doing the head down on the things that are working, but you're also head up and looking at the things that you need to be sure of in the future. The real skill is knowing when to shift, when you've got to make that shift. I've sort of put in 20% time into my day. So I'd spend 20% of my day learning new things, 80% of my day working on the things that make me the money. That means that 80/20 means that every day I've got built in an opportunity to learn. I block it out on my calendar. It's a big block right in the middle where I do my learning. Do a little bit at the beginning of the day, a big chunk in the middle of the day, and a bit at the end of the day. That way, I'm always making sure that when I do train people on new things, I have that information correct. Thinking ways really matters because of, well, simply, you get to anticipate the cycles before they come. You don't want to hit rough patches and not know how to navigate through them. You don't want to be constantly in a state of panic when an invoice doesn't get paid, or an investor decides not to invest, or whatever the thing is. You don't tend to over identify yourself with all those wins, or whether you win everything. When you anticipate the cycles, you get preparation before the decline hits. My own example is selling my digital marketing business back in 2022, actually. As the pandemic was coming to an end, I could see that the big bubble that we had of work, like massive amounts of work and really high revenue, was not going to last forever. It was coming to its end. I couldn't see it in our books, but I could see it in a wider industry. I saw it already starting to happen in the US. I'm like, I don't want to be caught with a massive staff and not know what to do with them when suddenly the work dries up. So I sold the business. I sold the business off to someone else. They absorbed all that risk. They didn't see that cycle coming to an end. I benefited by having a great payout. They got stuck with that whole problem. They had now a national footprint, and they're now actually out of business. So that what I anticipated they failed to, they were doubling down on this thing that was working like it would never end, but I could see the end coming. Now, there's just as likely would have happened that I got that wrong. The end might not have come. I still could be making money hand over fist, but I'm glad I got out what I did, given what happened. So when you bring all this together, what we've got to do is look at optimizing for what gets our interests and keeps our interest, because that gives us energy, right? It gives us the energy to wake up every morning and keep doing this thing. But then we've got to look up occasionally and think about these waves, these changes that keep coming in. Look up, and that gives us structure. That structure to maintain mental well-being, that maintain our physical well-being, maintain our retention of our staff, maybe retain the levels of energy we need to keep going. But together, they create that whole sustainable advantage. Good health, deep expertise in what you're doing, getting some actual money payoff from that really helps as well. But perhaps one of the things that really defines this is you have a sense of calm. People who can be calm in these emergency situations can go, well, it's just a cycle. It'll come, it'll go. We're fine. We're diversified. We'll not just survive this, we'll come through this really well. Oh, yeah, we'll have a reduction in revenue, but we're fine. That kind of calm, that kind of blessed assurance is not common in small businesses, because small businesses really do feel like they're living from paycheck to paycheck. So the long horizon advantage is that you get to be a person who does tolerate change and does tolerate rapid change and volatility that others just can't, right? But you also tend to not become super reactive. Something happens, quickly change, quickly pivot. You actually have enough going on that will either cushion you from those changes, or it means that, well, that changes one part of my business, but the other parts of my business don't get touched. And it helps you to build things in your business that give you a compounding advantage later on down the track. Sometimes that's documenting your business processes. Sometimes it's having really solid financial plans in place where you have great cash flow and a bundle, a war chest of cash that you can lean on when things do get lean. That long game isn't dramatic, like the up and down of small business going crazy every time there's some kind of cyclical change, but it is very disciplined. And it is very calming. And over time, that discipline becomes this superpower. It becomes this block of concrete that you can build all the new things on without fear of the whole thing falling down like a house of cards. So to playing the long game, choose the things that genuinely interest you, the things that really capture your interest. Then plan the next wave before you need it. So plan for those changes to come. And the best way of doing that is learning economics, learning financial literacy, learning what your market does, learn about your competitors, learn new technologies, and then stay with it. There is sometimes you need to shut things down or get rid of them, but basically for the main line of it, patience is the right strategy. Don't be spectacular, be consistent. I often say the best time to plant a tree was 50 years ago, but the second best time to plant a tree is today. So in your case, yeah, sure, it might have been really good if you started this in the pandemic when there's lots of money to be made on these kind of things that you're doing, if that's what you're doing. But you can start on this stuff now, because every step you take now is something that creates a long-term piece of value over the next 12, 18, 24, 36 months, 5, 10 years even. So if you want to continue that journey, I've got an online guide there ready for you at that address that's showing on the screen right now. Or you can use that particular QR code, which will take you through to it. It's a big interactive guide. You can answer questions and download it all. So you've actually got your plan to move forward with to play that long game. It also gives you a few of the references to the stuff I've been talking about. So if there's anything that didn't make sense, that online guide is ready for you.